Tom had been counting down the days. Every morning for the past 3 months, he'd wake up and think about it. His son's graduation day. After everything he'd been through, after all the time away from home, he was finally going to be there for one of the biggest moments in his boy's life. For 15 years, Tom had served his country as a Navy SEAL. 15 years of missing birthdays, holidays, and those everyday moments that make up a childhood. He'd been deployed to places most people only see on the news. He'd missed his son's first day of kindergarten because he was on a mission halfway across the world. He'd missed the Little League championship game where his boy hit the winning run. He'd even missed 3 Christmases in a row, but those days were behind him now. A training accident had changed everything. His leg had been badly injured during a routine exercise, and after months of physical therapy, the doctors told him what he already knew in his heart. His days as an active SEAL were over. The military had honorably discharged him, and while part of him mourned the end of that chapter, another part felt relief. He could finally be home. He could finally be the dad he'd always wanted to be. His son, Jake, had grown up understanding that his father's job was important. The kid never complained, at least not out loud. But Tom saw it in his eyes during those video calls from overseas, the disappointment when he had to miss another event. The forced smile when Tom promised he'd try to make the next one. Those looks haunted him more than anything he'd experienced in combat. So when Jake's graduation approached, Tom made a promise to himself. Nothing was going to keep him away this time. Nothing. The morning of the ceremony, Tom stood in front of his bedroom mirror, carefully putting on his Navy dress uniform. His hands moved with practiced precision, buttoning each button, adjusting each medal. The uniform still fit perfectly even after everything. His chest displayed rows of ribbons and medals, each one representing a story, a mission, a piece of his life dedicated to service. Jake knocked on the door and poked his head in. When he saw his father in full uniform, his face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Dad, you look amazing," Jake said, his voice filled with genuine pride. Tom smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "You sure about this, son? I can wear a regular suit if you'd prefer." "No way," Jake said firmly. "I want everyone to see what my dad did. I want them to know you're a hero." The word hero made Tom uncomfortable, like it always did. He didn't feel like a hero. He'd just done his job, served with men who were braver than he'd ever be. But seeing the pride in his son's eyes, he decided not to argue. If wearing this uniform made Jake proud, then he'd wear it with honor. They drove to the high school together, the spring sun warming the car through the windshield. Jake couldn't stop talking, nervous energy pouring out of him. He talked about his friends, about the after-party plans, about which teachers would probably cry during the ceremony. Tom just listened, soaking in every word, grateful to be here for this moment. The school's football stadium was already buzzing with activity when they arrived. Families were streaming in through the gates carrying balloons and flowers, cameras hanging around their necks. The graduates were gathering near the field entrance, a sea of blue and gold caps and gowns. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and sunscreen, and somewhere a band was warming up. Tom walked slowly, his injured leg hidden beneath his uniform trousers but still aching with each step. He'd left his cane in the car, not wanting to draw attention. The leg brace was enough of a reminder of what he'd lost. Jake ran off to join his classmates, turning back once to wave at his father with a huge grin. Tom waved back, his heart full. He made his way to the family section, finding a seat with a good view of where the graduates would be sitting. Around him, other parents were chatting excitedly, comparing notes about their kids' college plans and future dreams. Tom settled into his seat, adjusting his uniform jacket. A few people glanced his way, some nodding with respect when they saw the insignia and medals. He nodded back politely. The stadium was filling up fast now. The ceremony would start in about 20 minutes. He spotted Jake among the sea of graduates watching as his son adjusted his cap nervously, laughing with his friends. This was it. This was the moment Tom had dreamed about during those long nights overseas, when he'd lie awake wondering if his son would even remember him when he finally made it home. The sun was warm on his face. The crowd's chatter created a pleasant background hum. Tom allowed himself to relax, to feel the simple joy of being a father at his son's graduation. No missions to worry about, no danger lurking around corners. Just a proud dad, watching his boy prepare to take the next step in life. He had no idea that in less than 15 minutes everything was about to go terribly wrong. He had no idea that the uniform he wore with such pride, the same uniform his son had begged him to wear, would become the reason he'd be forced to leave. And he had no idea that this moment of humiliation would spark something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. Tom was watching the graduates line up when he noticed a woman walking directly toward him. She wore a dark blue blazer and had a school administrator badge clipped to her collar. Her face was set in a hard expression, the kind that said she was used to being in charge and didn't expect anyone to question her. She stopped right in front of him, blocking his view of Jake. Tom looked up at her, confused about why she seemed so focused on him. "Sir, I need you to come with me," she said. Her voice was sharp, authoritative. Not a request, but a command. Tom's stomach tightened. "Is something wrong? Is my son okay?" "Your son is fine," she said coldly. "But you need to leave the stadium now." The families sitting near Tom stopped their conversations. Heads turned. Tom felt heat rising to his face, that familiar feeling of being watched, judged. He'd felt it in combat situations, but this was different. This felt personal. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't understand," Tom said, keeping his voice steady. "I'm here for my son's graduation." "Jake Henderson. He's graduating today." The woman crossed her arms. "I can see that you're wearing some sort of military costume, but this is an academic ceremony. We have standards here. We have a dress code for all attendees, and what you're wearing is inappropriate." Tom felt like he'd been punched in the gut. For a moment, he couldn't find words. Did she just call his uniform a costume? "Ma'am, this isn't a costume," he said slowly, trying to keep his composure. "I'm a retired Navy SEAL. I served for 15 years. My son asked me to wear this uniform today. I'm not trying to cause any problems." "I don't care what story you're trying to sell," she snapped, her voice getting louder. More people were staring now. "This is a formal event, and you're creating a distraction. The dress code clearly states business or business casual attire. That military outfit is neither appropriate nor welcome here." Tom looked around at the other parents. Men in polo shirts and khakis, women in sundresses and casual blazers. Nothing fancy, nothing formal. He was probably dressed more formally than anyone else in the section. But somehow his uniform was the problem. "I served this country for 15 years, Tom said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I missed most of my son's childhood because I was deployed overseas. I've been shot at, I've lost friends, and I came home with injuries that ended my career. This uniform represents every sacrifice I made, every day away from my family, every missed birthday and Christmas. And you're telling me it's inappropriate?" The woman's expression didn't soften even a fraction. "I'm telling you that you need to leave, or I'll have security escort you out. Your choice." Tom glanced toward the graduates section. Jake was looking over now, his face confused and worried. Their eyes met across the crowd, and Tom saw his son start to stand up as if he might come over. Tom shook his head slightly, trying to signal Jake to stay put. The last thing he wanted was to ruin this day for his boy. "Please," Tom said quietly, hating how his voice almost broke. "This is my son's graduation. I've missed so much already. Can't we find some kind of compromise? I can sit in the back away from everyone else if that helps." "The compromise is you leaving," the woman said flatly. "Right now. Or I call security and you leave in handcuffs. I imagine that would be much more embarrassing for your son than you quietly walking out on your own." Tom felt trapped. He could stand his ground, cause a scene, probably get arrested. The ceremony would be disrupted. Everyone would be talking about the confrontation instead of celebrating the graduates. Jake's special day would be remembered for all the wrong reasons. Or he could leave quietly, swallow his pride, and let his son have his moment without drama. It wasn't really a choice at all. "I'll go," Tom said, standing up slowly. His injured leg protested, sending sharp pain up his thigh. He had to grab the back of the seat to steady himself. "But you should know something. This uniform isn't a costume or a statement. It's who I am. It's what I gave to this country. And my son is proud of it even if you're not." The woman didn't respond. She just stood there, arms crossed, watching him like a security guard watching a shoplifter leave a store. Tom gathered his dignity and started walking toward the exit. Each step felt heavier than the last. His leg throbbed, but the physical pain was nothing compared to what he felt in his chest. Around him, he could hear whisper. Some people looked sympathetic. Others just looked away. uncomfortable with the confrontation. As he limped past the last row of seats, he heard a man's voice call out, "Thank you for your service." Tom nodded without looking back, not trusting himself to speak. If he tried to talk right now, he might lose control of the emotions churning inside him. He made it through the gate just as the ceremony's opening music began to play. Through the metal fence, he could see the graduates standing for the national anthem. Tom stood too, out of habit, out of respect. Even alone outside the gates, even after being humiliated and kicked out, he stood at attention as the anthem played. And then, finally alone where no one could see him, Tom let the tears come. Not tears of anger, though he felt plenty of that. These were tears of grief. Grief for another missed moment. Grief for the look he'd seen on Jake's face. Grief for 15 years of sacrifice that apparently meant nothing to the people he'd sworn to protect. Inside the stadium, the ceremony was beginning. Outside the stadium, a father sat down on a cold concrete bench and put his head in his hands, listening to his son's graduation from a distance, just like he'd listened to so much of his son's life from halfway around the world. Tom sat on that bench for what felt like hours, though it was probably only 40 minutes. He could hear the muffled sounds of speeches coming from inside the stadium. Someone talking about the future. Someone else making jokes that earned waves of laughter. He heard applause several times but couldn't make out the words clearly enough to know when they called Jake's name. That hurt worse than anything. He'd come all this way, survived 15 years of dangerous missions, endured months of painful physical therapy, all to be here for this one moment, and he'd missed it anyway. Not because of deployment or duty, but because someone decided his uniform was offensive. The ceremony finally ended. Tom could hear the cheers and the sound of hundreds of people moving around. Families reuniting with their graduates, pictures being taken, that joyful chaos that comes when something important concludes and celebration begins. Tom stayed on the bench. He didn't know what else to do. His leg was hurting badly now from the walkout, and he needed to rest it before attempting to find Jake in the crowd. Part of him wondered if Jake would even want to see him. Maybe his son was embarrassed by what happened. Maybe Tom had ruined the day after all, despite trying so hard to avoid exactly that. Then he heard footsteps running toward him. Fast, urgent footsteps. "Dad!" Tom looked up and saw Jake sprinting toward him, his graduation gown billowing out behind him like a cape. His cap was gone, probably lost in the rush. His face was red, and Tom couldn't tell if it was from running or from crying or both. Jake crashed into him, wrapping his arms around his father in a tight hug. Tom stood up, ignoring the pain in his leg, and held his son close. "What happened?" Jake asked, pulling back to look at his father's face. "Where did you go? I kept looking for you, and your seat was empty, and I didn't understand." Tom took a breath, trying to figure out how to explain it, without making Jake angry on what should be a happy day. But before he could speak, Jake continued. "Mrs. Patterson told me," Jake said, his voice shaking with emotion. "She saw what happened. She said Principal Wilson kicked you out because of your uniform. Is that true? Did she really kick you out for wearing your SEAL uniform?" Tom nodded slowly. "She said it was inappropriate, that it violated the dress code. I didn't want to cause a scene and ruin your ceremony, so I left." "That's insane," Jake shouted, loud enough that a few passing families turned to look. "That's completely insane." "You're a veteran. You served our country. How is that inappropriate?" "Jake, it's okay," Tom started to say, but his son wasn't having it. "No, it's not okay, Dad. None of this is okay." Jake pulled out his phone from under his graduation gown. "Everyone needs to know what she did. This is wrong on every level. Son, maybe we should just let it go," Tom said, though even as he spoke the words, he didn't believe them. Part of him wanted the world to know what happened. But another part of him, the part that had spent 15 years following orders and not making waves, wanted to just move on. Jake was already typing on his phone, his fingers moving fast across the screen. "I'm not letting this go, Dad. You don't deserve this. You've sacrificed everything for this country, and she treated you like you did something wrong. People need to know." Tom watched as Jake composed a post. His son included a photo of Tom sitting alone outside the stadium, still in his full uniform, head bowed. Tom didn't even remember Jake taking that picture. The caption Jake wrote was simple but powerful. It explained what happened. How a Navy SEAL who served for 15 years was kicked out of his son's graduation for wearing his uniform. how the principal called it inappropriate and threatened to have him arrested. "There," Jake said, hitting the post button. "It's out there now." "Jake, I don't want you to be upset on your graduation day," Tom said gently. "This should be about celebrating you, not about what happened to me." Jake shook his head firmly. "How can I celebrate when my hero got treated like that? When my dad, who missed years of my life protecting people, gets kicked out for wearing the uniform he earned? Oh, Dad, this isn't right, and I'm not going to pretend it is." Other graduates started finding them. Jake's friends gathered around asking what happened, expressing disbelief and anger when they heard the story. Some of their parents came over too, several of them apologizing to Tom, saying they wished they'd spoken up when they saw what was happening. One father, a man named Frank, who Tom had never met before, shook his hand firmly. "My brother served in Vietnam," Frank said. "Got spit on when he came home. I thought we were past that kind of disrespect. I'm sorry you had to experience this." Tom's phone started buzzing in his pocket. Then it buzzed again. And again. He pulled it out and saw notifications popping up one after another. Text messages from old friends he hadn't heard from in months, fellow veterans he'd served with. All of them had seen Jake's post, which was apparently spreading fast across social media. Within an hour, Jake's post had been shared hundreds of times. People were tagging local news stations. Veterans groups were commenting, expressing outrage. The story was taking on a life of its own, growing bigger than Tom ever expected or wanted. Jake's phone rang. It was a local news station asking for an interview. Then another one called, and another. "Maybe we should talk to them," Jake said, looking at his father. "Maybe if enough people hear about this, it won't happen to someone else." Tom looked at his son, seeing not the boy he'd left behind all those years ago, but a young man willing to stand up for what was right. Despite everything, despite the pain and humiliation of the day, Tom felt a surge of pride. "Okay," Tom said quietly. "If you think it's the right thing to do, then we'll do it together." Neither of them knew it yet, but that decision was about to change everything. The story was just beginning to spread, and soon it would reach people who had the power to make things very different. People who understood what that uniform truly meant. By the next morning, Tom's phone wouldn't stop ringing. He'd barely slept, tossing and turning all night, replaying the events of the graduation in his mind. When he finally checked his phone around 6 in the morning, he had over 300 notifications. Jake's post had exploded overnight. It had been shared more than 50,000 times. Local news stations had run the story on their evening broadcasts. National outlets were picking it up. The comment section was filled with thousands of messages from veterans, military families, and regular people expressing outrage at what had happened. Tom sat at his kitchen table, scrolling through the messages, feeling overwhelmed. This wasn't what he wanted. He'd spent his entire career staying out of the spotlight, doing his job quietly, never seeking recognition. Now his story was everywhere, and he felt exposed in a way that made him deeply uncomfortable. Jake came downstairs, already dressed, his own phone in his hand. "Dad, you need to see this." The school district issued a statement. Tom took Jake's phone and read the official response. It was carefully worded, saying they were investigating the incident and taking it seriously. They thanked Tom for his service, but stopped short of actually apologizing. The statement felt hollow, like something written by lawyers trying to avoid responsibility. "That's not good enough," Jake said, reading his father's expression. "They're just trying to make this go away." Before Tom could respond, his phone rang again. This time it was a number he recognized, a number he hadn't seen pop up on his screen in over a year. "Rick?" Tom answered, his voice uncertain. "Tommy, brother, I just saw the news. What the hell happened?" The voice on the other end was warm, familiar, tinged with anger. Commander Rick Dawson had served alongside Tom in Afghanistan. They'd been through things together that most people couldn't imagine. They'd saved each other's lives more times than either of them could count. Tom explained the whole situation, hearing Rick's breathing get heavier as the story went on. "That's unacceptable," Rick said when Tom finished. "Completely unacceptable. Listen, I'm making some calls. The team needs to know about this." "Rick, you don't have to do that," Tom protested. "It's already turning into a bigger deal than it needs to be." "Brother, someone disrespected you." "Someone disrespected what we all stand for. That uniform you were wearing? That's our uniform. When they disrespect you, they disrespect all of us. We take care of our own. You know that." After they hung up, Tom sat quietly, his coffee growing cold in his mug. He'd always been proud of the brotherhood he'd found in the SEALs. These men weren't just co-workers or fellow soldiers. They were family, the kind of family that would run into fire for you without a second thought. Throughout the day, the calls kept coming, former teammates from across the country reaching out. Some he'd served with a decade ago, others from his final unit. All of them had seen the story. All of them were angry. All of them wanted to do something. The school district's phones were apparently ringing off the hook. Veterans organizations were demanding answers. A petition calling for the principal's resignation gathered 20,000 signatures in less than 12 hours. The pressure was building, and there was no way to stop it now. By evening, the school district called a press conference. Tom and Jake watched it on the local news. The superintendent stood at a podium looking uncomfortable under the camera lights. He announced that Principal Wilson had been placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation. He also announced that the district would be holding a special ceremony to publicly apologize to Tom and honor his service. "They're only doing this because they got caught," Jake said bitterly, "because the story went viral. If no one had paid attention, nothing would have changed." Tom couldn't argue with that. It was probably true. But still, at least something was happening. At least the district was being held accountable. His phone rang again. Rick calling back. "Tommy, listen up. We're coming to you." "The whole team?" "Well, as many as can make it. We're going to show that community what it means to stand together. We're going to give your son a graduation ceremony he'll actually remember for the right reasons." "Rick, that's not necessary," Tom started to say. "It's not about necessary, brother. It's about what's right. We let them disrespect one of us, we let them disrespect all of us. That's not how we operate. You know that." The guys are already booking flights. "We're doing this." Tom felt emotion catch in his throat. "I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just be ready. We're going to make this right." After the call ended, Tom sat in silence for a long moment. Jake was watching him, curious about the conversation. "What was that about?" Jake asked. Tom looked at his son, not quite believing what he was about to say. "Your graduation ceremony. Apparently, you're getting another one. A bigger one. And my old SEAL team is coming." "Wait, what? Your whole team?" "That's what Rick said. He's organizing it. I don't even know how many guys are coming, but knowing Rick, it's going to be more than a few." Jake's eyes went wide. "Dad, that's incredible. But why would they do all that?" Tom thought about how to explain it. About the bonds formed in combat. About the way men who've relied on each other in life or death situations never really stop being brothers, even years after they've gone their separate ways. "Because that's what SEALs do," Tom finally said. "We take care of our own. Always." Over the next 2 days, Tom's phone exploded with messages from former teammates confirming they were coming. From California, from Virginia, from Texas, from Florida. Some were driving through the night. Others were flying in. A few were still active duty and using personal leave to make the trip. Rick called with updates every few hours. The plan was growing bigger than Tom had imagined. The school district, sensing an opportunity to repair their public image, had agreed to host a special community event at the stadium. They were calling it a celebration of service and achievement. But Tom knew what it really was. It was his brothers coming to stand beside him. Coming to show that when you wear that uniform, you're never alone. Coming to prove that honor and respect still mean something. The ceremony was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. Tom had 4 days to prepare himself for something he never expected. 4 days to wrap his mind around the fact that his SEAL brothers were descending on this small town to make a statement that the whole country would see. This story wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Saturday morning arrived with clear blue skies and a gentle breeze. Tom woke up early, his stomach churning with nerves. He'd faced enemy fire, jumped out of airplanes in the middle of the night, and led missions in hostile territory. But somehow the thought of what was about to happen today made him more anxious than any of that. Rick had called the night before with the final count. Over 200 SEALs were coming, some active duty, most retired. They'd be arriving throughout the morning, and the ceremony was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. Tom put on his uniform again, the same one that had caused all this trouble. His hands were steadier this time, though. He wasn't scared or ashamed. He was proud. Whatever happened today, he'd be surrounded by his brothers, and that made all the difference. Jake knocked on his door dressed in his graduation gown again. "You ready, Dad?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Tom said, managing a smile. They drove to the stadium together just like they had 2 weeks ago. But this time everything was different. As they pulled into the parking lot, Tom's breath caught in his throat. The parking lot was full of cars, many with veteran license plates, and standing near the stadium entrance in perfect formation were SEALs. Dozens of them already there in their dress uniforms, standing at attention. More were arriving by the minute, gathering in organized groups. Tom got out of his car slowly, his leg protesting as always. The moment his feet hit the pavement, he heard a voice boom across the parking lot. "Attention!" Every SEAL in sight snapped to attention in unison. The sound of hundreds of heels clicking together echoed off the stadium walls. Tom felt tears spring to his eyes before he could stop them. Rick emerged from the formation, walking toward Tom with that familiar confident stride. When he reached Tom, he saluted. Tom returned the salute, his hand shaking slightly. "Good to see you, brother," Rick said, then pulled Tom into a tight hug. "We've got your back. Always have, always will." "I can't believe you all came," Tom managed to say. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Rick said. Then looking at Jake, he smiled. "You must be Jake. Your dad talked about you constantly during deployment. Drove us all crazy with how proud he was." Jake shook Rick's hand, looking overwhelmed by the scene unfolding around them. The stadium was already filling up with people. Word had spread throughout the community, and it seemed like half the town had shown up. The local news stations were there with their cameras. Veterans from all branches of service had come to show support. Regular families who'd heard the story and wanted to be part of making it right. As Tom walked into the stadium with Jake and Rick, he saw the transformation. American flags lined the walkways. A banner hung across the field reading "Honor Service, Sacrifice." The bleachers were packed with people, and when they saw Tom enter, they stood up and began to applaud. The applause grew louder, rolling through the stadium like thunder. Tom stopped walking, overwhelmed by the response. These were strangers, most of them. People he'd never met, never protected directly. But they were honoring him anyway, honoring what the uniform represented. The ceremony began with the national anthem, performed by a SEAL who had one of the most beautiful voices Tom had ever heard. As the anthem played, all 200 SEALs stood at perfect attention, saluting. The sight of it, all these warriors standing together, made several people in the crowd openly cry. The school superintendent approached the microphone, looking far more humble than he had at the press conference. He apologized directly to Tom, acknowledging that what had happened was wrong and should never have occurred. He announced new policies protecting veterans' rights to wear their uniforms at any school events. Principal Wilson had resigned, he added, and would not be returning. Then Rick took the microphone. He spoke about what it means to serve, about sacrifice, about the men and women who give years of their lives to protect others. He spoke about Tom specifically, about missions they'd run together, about the times Tom had put himself in danger to protect his team. "This uniform isn't a costume," Rick said, his voice carrying across the stadium. "It's not a political statement. It's a symbol of sacrifice." Tom Henderson gave 15 years of his life to this country. He missed birthdays, holidays, and precious moments with his son. He came home with injuries that ended his career. And when he showed up to finally be there for one of his son's most important days, wearing this uniform with pride, he was told it was inappropriate. Rick paused, letting the words sink in. "Brothers and sisters, I'm here to tell you that there is nothing more appropriate than a father wearing his uniform to honor his son. Nothing more appropriate than showing the next generation what service and sacrifice look like. And that's why we're all here today, to make that statement loud and clear." The crowd erupted in applause. Then came the moment Tom had been waiting for. Jake was called to the stage, and this time Tom was right there in the front row, watching every step. As Jake walked across the stage, all 200 SEALs stood at attention. The stadium fell completely silent except for Jake's footsteps. Rick presented Jake with a special scholarship from the Navy SEAL Foundation to help with college expenses. Then he presented Tom with a Community Service Award, honoring his 15 years of military service. But the most powerful moment came next. Rick called all the SEALs forward, and they surrounded Jake and Tom on the field. The crowd watched as these warriors, these brothers in arms, formed a circle around the father and son. Tom, Rick said, his voice breaking slightly. You're never alone. None of us are. That's what this uniform means. That's what this brotherhood means. We stand together, always. The stadium erupted in another standing ovation that lasted over 5 minutes. Tom held Jake close, both of them crying openly now, surrounded by the men who understood what sacrifice truly meant. After the ceremony, as people slowly filed out and the SEALs began saying their goodbyes, Jake pulled his father aside. "Dad," he said, "I know you missed my real graduation. I know that hurt you. But this right here, this is something I'll remember for the rest of my life. Not because of the ceremony or the speeches, but because I got to see what you really are. Not just my dad, but a hero. And I got to see that you're never really alone because you've got all these brothers who will always have your back." Tom smiled through his tears. "I'm not a hero, son. I just served with heroes." "No, Dad," Jake said firmly. "You're my hero. And after today, everyone else knows it too." As the sun began to set over the stadium, Tom stood there in his uniform, his son beside him, surrounded by his brothers. The uniform that had caused so much pain had become a symbol of something much bigger. A symbol of honor restored, of community coming together, of the unbreakable bonds between those who serve. Sometimes the world gets it wrong, but sometimes, if you're lucky, you're surrounded by people who will make it right.